We live in such disruptive and uncertain times, and I think this past 18 months has proved exactly that. Parents, if you are confused about how to talk to your kids about uncertainty and what actions you can take to make them feel safer, then you need to listen up as we discuss this tricky topic with Nikki Bush, human potential and parenting expert, speaker and author. Nikki, as always, so good to connect with you, always coming through with sage advice that we need to hear, because it's tough out here for parents.
It really is, Jamie, you know, and parents tend to respond by overreacting. That's kind of our typical response. And what we're seeing is a pandemic of parental guilt and overprotection. You may have seen some of those pictures, and Graham, you were saying earlier, you know, you've turned into a neurotic person since you've become a parent in disruptive times. You want to wrap your children up in cotton wool. You want to get some bubble wrap and, you know, wrap them up so that the world doesn't impact on them. And I know that we'd like things to be different, but actually we have to deal with life as it is.
Next, what are those common traps that parents fall into during these crazy times of uncertainty?
Great question, Graham. And for me, I've isolated them down to about 4. The first one is that we feel incredibly guilty. You know, our poor children growing up with this life that's not ideal, you know, not our idyllic childhood that we pictured for them. And the problem with guilt is that it translates to our children as a lack of control, that we are feeling out of control. And what happens then is we're actually handing over the keys of control to them. And strangely enough, even babies get it, and they will try and control the uncontrollable. And it's not a safe space for them to be in. So if you are feeling very guilty about the way things are turning out, you are putting your children in the driver's seat, and it's not good for you and it's not good for them. The second trap is that we start feeling sorry for them instead of encouraging them to manage their own feelings of anger, fear, and anxiety. Now, that doesn't help with your baby, but certainly it does help with young children into the teens, is they need to have an opportunity to express those feelings, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But we have to be careful of not rescuing our children too much. Otherwise, what happens is they turn into hopeless and helpless young children, and that doesn't help them or us either. So they start playing victim card. The third one is that we fall into the trap of thinking that the world was perfect before this disruption. And actually, Graham,
we were just in denial.
We were in denial. We talked about the stress and the traffic and the time and all those things. Actually, it wasn't perfect before, and we have the opportunity now to reset. And the final trap is that we're wanting things to go back to normal, wishing for something that's actually never going to happen, which is disempowering.
What is normal anymore? What is normal? But we're obviously wanting to change this narrative, and that's why we have you, the expert. How can we as parents talk to our children about the disruption and uncertainty that we're facing right now while still building their trust?
So we actually have to be quite honest and transparent with our children without being fear-mongering. We actually cannot tell our children that we're not scared, and neither can we promise them that everything is going to be all right tomorrow. And we actually have to lay out the facts quite honestly in order to retain their trust. And then we need to take time to help them when they're old enough. And we're talking about sort of 5, 6-year-olds and up, old enough to distinguish between the facts and the feelings. This is actually really valuable. So whether your kids are living through the ups and downs that are brought about through the pandemic, or we had civil unrest quite recently, you know, all of those things are scary because our kids are actually seeing things playing out on television in front of them. So we can't deny it, especially if you have that television on 24/7 on 24/7 news reporting. So what we can say is something like, yes, this is terrible, and I'm worried. While I can't promise you that everything is going to be all right very soon, we can and will handle it. Now, this is very, very important for your children to hear you say. We can and will handle it. And then you need to unpack those facts separate from the feelings and all those emotions that are actually flying around. And so that means looking at what's being done to solve the problem right now. So children are very concrete thinkers. That's what you need to remember. They're watching everything, and they really do need you to help them. Like, why are we wearing masks? Why are we having vaccinations? Why are we social distancing? So what is the government doing? What are we doing? What are we doing in our homes? What is your school doing to keep you safe? So they need to actually see those things in action, because that is the way they think. It's the way their brains work.
Nix, that's why my son knows President Cyril Ramaphosa as Mr. COVID, and that is why I probably need to speak to you every morning, I think, before I go out into the big, brave, wide world out there. Nix, stick around. We're going to continue the conversation now. We are talking to Nikki Bush about parenting during these very uncertain and unsettling times.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
So a little bit earlier in the show, we connected with one of our favorites, human potential and parenting expert Nikki Bush, chatting about how to talk to our children about uncertainty and what actions we can take to make them, and I suppose ourselves, feel a little bit safer. We're going to dive right back into this. It's a crazy time, and I think as a result, a lot of us parents have been feeling a little bit underbalanced, if you will. So Nick, thanks for sticking around.
Yes, Graham. So, what we can say to our kids in these disruptive and uncertain times is we can cry, we can worry, we can complain, or we can be confident that we can handle this and do what needs to be done. So this really means that as parents, we have to dig deep into our own resilience, our belief that we can cope. And children really do need to hear that we're confident, and we can handle this situation right now. This is the plan for right now. And if we need to create a new plan, if the situation changes, we will. And if there's one thing we've learned through COVID, is that we do need to have plan B.
Yeah.
Because how often has Uncle Cyril said, we will be going back to school on the 26th of July, and it doesn't happen. So we do need to have that backup little comment with our children. This is the plan for now, but if it needs to change, it will. And yes, we're worried, but we will handle this in the best way we can. So we have to instill our belief in our children that they will handle things, and vice versa, because they also need to feel confidence that you will take whatever action you need to take.
Nikki, do you think there are two pandemics going on right now? Is there a thing called a pandemic of parental guilt as well as overprotection? Because, we're all feeling this sort of way.
So overprotective, but I feel justified in being overprotective. That's the thing.
Well, yes, in a way you are, but what you've got to remember is that parental guilt is more infectious than the coronavirus. And so you've got to keep yourself in check. Children have got little antennae that are up 24/7. And they are perceptive, more perceptive than you and I. And they know what's going on without you even saying.
Yeah.
So, a quick recap of how we can avoid the pandemic of parental guilt and overprotection in these uncertain times is that you, as an adult, need to keep your perspective. Don't fall into that guilt trap. You didn't cause this. And don't feel sorry for your children. The problem with feeling sorry for your children is that you actually hold them in a victim space. And you don't empower them to deal with life as it is, not as you would like it to be. And then you've got to co-create a new normal instead of wishing we could go backwards. And here's something that you've heard me beat on about for years and years. Keep routine. Routine actually helps children feel safer and more secure. So a regular wake-up time, a regular go-to-bed time, and hold those as bookends to the day. And then really paying deep attention to your children in order to make them feel loved. And the three most important questions every child is asking every single day, non-verbally, subconsciously, unconsciously, do you see me? Are you seeing all of them, not just their body? Do you hear me? Not just the words I'm speaking, but maybe all those fears and anxieties I can't express. And am I important to you? Where do I fall on your list of priorities? And if your children are getting 3 yes answers non-verbally every single day to their non-verbal questions, their emotional cups will be filled, and I promise you they will feel safe and secure. So that is the best advice that I can give you this morning, apart from the fact that our listeners and viewers can actually download my Parenting in Disruptive Times free resource.
Well, as my family jets off to the UK so that my daughter can actually meet the rest of her family and I sit here alone for the next 8 weeks, I'll probably be phoning you every single day, Nikki. Thank you so much. I do feel a little bit better, just putting it in perspective, as you said, but I think that's a brilliant resource and definitely one that I will be downloading. Nikki Bush, thank you so much for joining us. We absolutely love you.
Great pleasure. Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Jamie.
That was, of course, human potential and parenting expert Nikki Bush. We love her. Make sure to get a hold of that free resource, Parenting in Disruptive Times.